Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning. I think we should get started now. This is our session on productive uses of energy in Ethiopia's agriculture. And the conveners are International Food Policy Research Institute, the Ministry of Water, Irrigation and Energy of Ethiopia, Rocky Mountain Institute, as well as RAWI Leibniz Institute for Economic Research and University of Massachusetts Amherst. So, as you all know, the energy investment needs and options to support the development of agriculture in Ethiopia largely remains unknown, and past energy planning studies, in particular, have not explicitly assessed the energy demand for agriculture. So we hope this session will provide some insights on productive uses of energy in Ethiopia's agriculture by way of providing or illuminating on concurrent works that explore opportunities for productive uses of energy, in particular through scaling potentials and implementations. And today, we have a good lineup of presentations on this topic. We are delighted to have the company of His Excellency Dr. Freyot Weldehana, who is the State Minister of the Ministry of Ethiopia's Ministry of Water, Irrigation and Energy. And he will tell us more about Ethiopia's government's initiatives to supply electricity and facilitate productive uses of energy above and beyond providing access to light. Then Dr. Freyot's presentation will be followed by Dr. Hua Ji, who is a research fellow at IFPRI, and Hua will be presenting IFPRI's ongoing work on spatially explicit estimation of energy demand for irrigation development in Ethiopia, as well as the least cost energy options to meet that demand. That presentation will be followed by June Lukuyu from University of Massachusetts Amherst. She's a Hub Fellow and a doctoral student and researcher at University of Mass Amherst. By the way, Hua's presentation is a part of the energy and economic growth and Oxford Policy Management. So June's presentation is also another EEG OPM funded study on energy demand forecasting and simulation techniques for irrigation in Ethiopia. June's presentation will be followed by Kester Waite's presentation. Kester is a senior associate from Rocky Mountain Institute, and Kester's presentation will move the discussion from irrigation to energy demand for agro-processing, as he will be highlighting on opportunities for productive uses of energy in agricultural processing. Kester will not be here in person, but we will have the video from his presentation, and that presentation will be followed by Q&A. I wish all presenters a very good and productive meeting. I will, without further ado, I will call upon Dr. Freyot to make some statements on Ethiopia's government's initiatives. Thanks a lot. Dr. Freyot, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. David. Actually, I don't have a presentation. It's just a small talk, which is relevant to the topic at hand. So maybe to start, dear participants, good afternoon. I would like to share with you current plans and initiatives of the government of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia to provide access to electricity with a particular emphasis on productive use. In the context of rural development, productive use of energy is understood to be associated primarily with the provision of motive power for agricultural, industrial, or commercial uses. Electricity being used for grinding of grain, operation of power tools, irrigation of farmland, and facilitation of many commercial activities are typical examples. The emphasis is not only on direct income generating uses of energy, but also indirect ones, such as simple lighting, which can be considered as a catalyst for extended working hours and additional income. The 10-year sector development plan of the government articulates its commitment to achieving universal access to clean, reliable, and affordable energy with consistent and sustainable development goal, SDG 7 of the United Nations. The Ministry of Water, Irrigation, and Energy is demonstrating leadership in working towards this objective and recognizes the importance of strengthening ties with external parties, including private partners. The first version of the National Electrification Program, NEP 1.0, launched in November 2017, underlines that off-grid technologies will constitute a segment in closing the energy gap by 2025 through joint public-private partnerships. The role of the private sector in disseminating off-grid technologies and innovations is well recognized by the Ethiopian government. The importance of off-grid solutions in general and solar photovoltaic technologies in particular is very clear. At the time of universal access, about 35% of the population is expected to be dependent on off-grid technologies, and not only importing, but also local manufacturing of standard products, including installations and maintenance of mini grids for community services play a significant role in the provision of sustainable rural energy solutions. In 2019, the government of Ethiopia launched NEP 2.0, basically an updated, full-fledged off-grid program to reach the target through public and private efforts, leveraging the latest technical and analytical inputs. The geospatial analysis conducted for the country identifies the least cost technology solution by location and over time, indicating the progressive extension of the grid footprint. Based on this, off-grid solutions are expected to provide services to 35% of the population, while acknowledging possible short-term electrification solutions for those households and communities waiting to get grid connection by 2025. Furthermore, NEP 2 operationalized the multi-tier framework survey for the first time with a customer-centric approach to access and identification of the most appropriate technology solutions in space and time based on electricity demand in combination with the GIS tools. NEP 2.0 also introduces the minimum subsidy tender MST concept, which uses a competitive bidding process to support private sector enterprises that can cost effectively provide off-grid electricity services. In addition to the two features mentioned, NEP 2 also contains an embedded commitment and strategy on closing gender gaps on off-grid value chains related to women entrepreneurs and consumers. NEP 2 reinforces the government's commitment to achieving universal energy access and emphasized the sector-wide approach, leveraging both public and private sector. It's based on three important goals for the country: balancing efficiency and equity in access delivery, maximizing reach while reducing time required to reach all citizens with electricity services, and finally, supporting economic growth and human development giving priority to connecting productive use applications, schools, clinics, and ensuring water supply. The first project in NET 2.0 is the World Bank supported project, Access to Distributed Electricity and Lighting in Ethiopia, abbreviated as ADEL, which is about to be launched within the next 3 months or so. The proposed project supports delivery of energy services to enable productive use in rural and deep rural areas through off-grid solutions and includes targeted support for productive and income-generating activities. Activities such as agriculture, irrigation, cold chain, and processing. This will, of course, continue to improving the livelihood of fragile and vulnerable communities and increasing food security. New supply chains that will be created in the rural areas and innovative business model such as pay-go, combining product distribution and with consumer financing will improve the physical, digital, and financial infrastructure of poor and vulnerable communities and create opportunities for women and youth disproportionately affected by unemployment and lack of productive opportunities. In addition, sustainable electricity access for health facilities and schools will help build human capital. Overall, the provision of sustainable, reliable, and affordable electricity to households, farmers, and public institutions will increase their resilience to climate and other future shocks. Implementation of ADEL projects benefits from few pilot studies made by different development partners, including but not limited to the Rocky Mountain Institute, RMI, the IKEA Foundation, and the German Development Agency, GIZ. In summary, the government of Ethiopia is engaged in national electrification programs and projects, not only to increase access, but also to encourage productive uses to enable economic development from the community level up to the national level without damaging the environment. Thank you very much for your patience. Wish you successful discussion.
Thank you so much, Dr. Freiwet, for providing that perspective from the government as well as what is planned with the help of donors and the community as well. I will call upon Hua now, who's a research fellow at IFPRI, to make his presentations. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. It's my great pleasure to have this opportunity, to present our study regarding productive use of energy in agriculture in Ethiopia. Energy is used in agriculture production for many purposes. In our study, we focus on energy used for irrigation. Energy is required in irrigation for water lifting. Irrigation plays an important role in global food production. Irrigated land accounts for about 20% of cropland of the world and contributes 40% of global food production. Sub-Saharan Africa is behind other regions in irrigation development. Currently, only 3% of cropland in Sub-Saharan Africa is irrigated. In Ethiopia, this number is about 5%. The lack of irrigation makes crop production susceptible to risk of unstable rainfall and limits the opportunity of farming in dry seasons. So there is great interest in expanding irrigated crop production to improve agricultural productivity in sub-Saharan African countries, including Ethiopia. Irrigation development is traditionally considered as an issue in water management area, but given the inherent energy requirement for water lifting, there is a strong nexus between water and energy in irrigation development. Like many other sub-Saharan African countries, Ethiopia is stricken by energy poverty. For example, as of 2019, only 36% of rural population in Ethiopia has access to electricity. This poses a barrier to the development of the irrigated agriculture. Off-grid technologies provide a solution to address the energy poverty challenge. They allow farmers to gain access to modern energy services without extending power grid to remote rural areas. That could be very costly. In our study, we evaluate the adoption potential of irrigation water and pumping systems powered by two off-grid energy solutions, solar and diesel energy in Ethiopia. Diesel is currently the most widely used energy form for irrigation water pumping. Solar energy is an emerging option. It's renewable and cleaner. It's interesting to know to what extent solar energy can substitute diesel energy to support the future development of irrigated agriculture in Ethiopia. The study presented here is designed to answer this question, and the study is forward-looking and is at a national scale. Specifically, the study consists of analysis at two levels. In the analysis at the first level, we estimate and compare the life cycle costs of water pumping systems under the two energy solutions and in a range of crop cultivation scenarios. There is evidence showing that farmers tend to use irrigation to cultivate high-value crops such as wheat, maize, vegetables, and pulses. The results of the first level analysis under the cultivation scenarios of these crops are shown on this slide. We use break-even values of installed cost of solar system expressed in unit of US dollars per watt as a metric for cost effectiveness of solar irrigation relative to diesel irrigation. The break-even installed cost is the maximum installed cost of solar system up to which solar system is more cost effective than the diesel system. For example, if the break-even cost is $2 per watt, the installed cost of solar system must be less than this value so that solar irrigation is more economical. So the green zones on the map, on these maps are sites with high break-even values favorable to the adoption of solar irrigation, while the situation is opposite in places in red. Apparently, there is a large spatial variability in cost effectiveness of solar irrigation relative to diesel irrigation, and the economic performance of solar irrigation vary with the crop choice in irrigated crop production. Results of the cost comparison analysis provide a first look at the issue of energy technology selection in irrigation expansion in Ethiopia. At the same time, it should be noted that irrigation adoption is influenced by many other factors such as water availability, economic profitability, and land suitability. Also, as just mentioned, irrigation adoption may result in crop exchange and the farming system expansion in dry season. Considering this and the fact that energy is part of the production cost of the irrigated production and may influence the irrigation technology adoption and the crop choice decision in irrigated production. And yeah. An integrated irrigation and energy planning analysis framework is needed for the study. Such an integrated framework is proposed and applied in analysis at the second level. It builds on the irrigation planning methodology we developed in our previous irrigation investment analysis in sub-Saharan African countries. Crop mix change during the development of irrigation is simulated endogenously. The model can provide probabilistic forecasting of the future irrigation expansion situations. What's worth mentioning here is that in the analysis, we found that expansion of irrigation in Ethiopia is severely constrained by water scarcity. Many sites with estimated low success probability of irrigation adoption on this map are actually have land suitable for irrigation development, but the farmers at these sites are faced with intense competition for water resources. The model also reports the adoption probability of solar irrigation and the diesel irrigation respectively. Sites in green are places where adoption probability of solar irrigation exceeds the adoption probability of diesel irrigation. Based on the calculated adoption probability of each land pixel, we can further compute the expected value of irrigated area under solar irrigation and the diesel irrigation over the country, and use them as estimates of national irrigation development potentials. Under the circumstance of lacking accurate estimation and the projection of solar system installed cost in the simulation generating adoption probability maps displayed on previous slides, an installed cost of solar system of $1.8 per watt was assumed. In this case, the total irrigation expansion potential in Ethiopia estimated in our study is about 1.8 million hectares. That includes 1.2 million hectares under the solar irrigation. Sensitivity analysis shows that this estimate total irrigation development potential is not sensitive to the installed cost of a solar system, but the estimates of solar and the diesel irrigation potentials are. For example, the estimated adoption potential of solar irrigation will increase to 1.6 million hectares if the installed cost of solar system can drop to $1.6 per watt, but it will decrease to only 0.2 million hectares if the installed cost of the solar system is $2 per watt. This highlights the financial risk in solar irrigation adoption. Before I end my presentation, I'd like to recap the main things from our study. Firstly, our study suggests there is a large irrigation development potential up to 1.8 million hectares in Ethiopia. Secondly, the cost comparison analysis shows that there is large spatial variability in cost effectiveness of solar irrigation. Lastly, large adoption potential of solar irrigation, about 1.2 million hectares, are also identified, but the development of solar irrigation is subject to financial risk related to the uncertain installed cost of solar technologies in future. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Hoa. This is nice, and I think it will take us, it would be a good segue to June Lukuyu's presentation from University of Massachusetts Amherst. June, please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. And thank you for the introduction. So I'm very excited to be presenting our work, which is a joint collaboration between researchers at RWI, PSI, and UMass Amherst. And we are leveraging advances in remote sensing technology, which has enabled the development of powerful data processing methods like machine learning, which are augmenting ground-based data to give insights more broadly, and particularly in areas where collecting data on the ground can be difficult. And so we are applying this to electrification planning in Ethiopia. And sorry. Okay, so the goal of our project is to answer two main research questions. The first is whether we can leverage remote sense data, ground-based data, and machine learning techniques to be able to inform where there's latent electricity demand in the agricultural sector, and with the goal of informing electricity system planning. And the second question is to then use these insights to inform which kind of agricultural demand stimulation interventions can be derived, piloted, and eventually implemented. But for the purpose of this presentation, I'll be focusing on a project that seeks to answer the first question. And so just to go more in depth into the project itself, we would like to use remote sensed pollution data together with survey data that has been collected in Ethiopia, as well as a machine learning model to be able to identify where there is existing diesel-powered irrigation, who has given a very good background on the benefits of solar-powered irrigation over diesel irrigation. So we are thinking this would be a good opportunity for conversion of these diesel-powered irrigation systems, and they can serve as fast opportunities to add electricity demand to the grid during system expansion. And so with the survey data, as I mentioned, was collected earlier this year in two clusters, one in Amhara and the other in Oromia. And this entailed collecting over 5,000 plot measurements together with observed farm irrigation information. And the second part was a very in-depth farmer survey of over 1,000 farmers. And this collected very in-depth information on farming activity. And so using this ground-based data, we plan to train a supervised machine learning model. And I'll just explain a little bit about what this entails. With the raw data we've collected, we are able to know where different irrigation plots are, what are the irrigation methods there, what is the energy source, what are the crops grown, and then we can also add in spatial information, added information on those specific areas, such as meteorological data and population density. And so these attributes of specific areas is fed into a machine learning model, which then trains the model to find areas with high diesel-based irrigation activity by finding patterns in this input data. And we do separate our data set into two. The first I mentioned is our training data set. The second is a test data set, which will then be used to test whether our model can successfully identify these areas and how accurately it can do so. And so why pollution? The main pollution or pollutants of diesel engines are carbon monoxide and nitrogen dioxide. And these two pollutants can be measured remotely. Currently, I'm using an instrument called Tropomi on a Sentinel-5 satellite. It has very good resolution. Temporal is daily, and at the equator, the spatial resolution is about 7 by 3.5 kilometers. And so the first step was to check how satellite pollution measurements correlate with ground measurements themselves. So we've got data from Accra, Ghana over a period of just over a month. And we compared the ground-based measurements from a NOx analyzer with a tropospheric measurement above the same area. And we looked at the trend. And so the graph on the left shows this trend over that month, and we can see the patterns are quite similar. And on the right, we then fitted a linear model to quantify what the correlation would be between the two. And what we saw is a very strong positive correlation between the ground measurements from the NOx analyzer and the tropospheric measurement. And so the underlying hypothesis behind our project is that diesel-based irrigation activity is detectable by matching pollution pattern to irrigation seasonality. So take, for example, this spatial graph I've shown here. It's of one of the two clusters. I showed the one in Amhara, and it's a spatial, I have classified the different plots based on what energy source is powering irrigation. So take, for example, an area like this that has very intensive diesel-based irrigation, and we have another area that has non-diesel-based irrigation. So what we'd be looking for is how the pollution measurements align with the irrigation activity. The graph I've just shown on the right is also from the survey data, showing the timing of the different number of plots on each day of the year. And we see that the highest irrigation activity was reported between January and May, and we also see that cyclic nature of irrigation with the seasons. And so I'll just present a little bit about our early findings in the data exploration phase of this project. And for this graph on the left axis is the tropospheric measurements over the areas with diesel-based irrigation only and those with non-diesel-based irrigation. So to begin, we see this pattern of pollution, again, a cyclic sort of pattern, which aligns with irrigation patterns, I said, between January and May having the highest activity. And going forward, would like to further analyze what factors are driving these patterns of NO2 and verify if indeed they're actually matching with irrigation patterns. The second observation is if we actually compare some of the areas with only diesel-based irrigation and some with only non-diesel-based irrigation, we see higher NO2 values in the areas with non-diesel-based irrigation, especially during the months of high irrigation activity. And then going forward, we'd also like to further test this with additional areas and as well to check whether this is a statistically significant difference. So together with those next steps I've just mentioned, we would also like to analyze other measures of pollution, such as carbon monoxide and methane, and look at their patterns as well over these areas. And then next, also account for other effects on sources of pollution, like vehicles, like crop burning, and discount those from the pollution measurements we are observing. Third, then would like to go ahead and train and validate and test that machine learning model I introduced to be able to classify areas based on their irrigation energy source. And finally, would like to engage with the utility to discuss how our study findings and models can be useful for electrification planning and system expansion. I look forward to your questions later on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, June, for that presentation. Both Hua's presentation as well as June's are two of the 6 projects that are funded by the Applied Research Program on Energy and Economic Growth at the University of Oxford. And there seems to be a very good similarities and potential to collaborate, which we have already started. And I think these results already show that we need to continue on that one. But the next presentation from Rocky Mountain Institute by Kester Wade is going to move this discussion towards this energy demand for agro-processing and post-harvest processings. So Kester couldn't make it today because he just started school. But we have his recording. So Katarla, please go ahead.
My name is Kester Wade. To continue the discussions you heard from the other presenters in our lineup, I'll shift the conversation on productive uses of energy towards identifying and evaluating opportunities in post-harvest processing in Ethiopia. I'd like to thank Maui and our partners at IFPRI for the opportunity to participate in this discussion with you all today. So, in Ethiopia's productive use landscape, RMI focused on the knowledge gaps around which activities to electrify, how to electrify, and specifically what support do partners need and what business models are feasible to channel that support, as well as how to scale and what systemic barriers exist and actions that are needed to address these barriers. RMI recently completed a study that answers some of those key questions and lays the pathway for considering scale-up. We conducted a field survey to understand ground realities and to guide our determination of prevalent end uses and feasible approaches. We mapped out value chains to identify which end uses can be electrified in the short term. We confirmed this prioritization by assessing the commercial viability of end uses for the processor and the mini-grid developer. And this was our only mini-grid specific technology analysis in the report, which otherwise should apply to any technology for rural electrification. Lastly, we mapped out barriers and the broader level interventions that can address these barriers. Today, I will only focus on our value chain analysis section of the report, but I invite you to check out the entire report and study on our website. So to start us off, I want to put you in context of what types of communities we targeted. We primarily focused on communities with a couple major features: high agricultural production, not currently electrified, already existing infrastructure like roadways and cell service, and existing business activities. On the left of the slide, you can see a brief profile of Exziarab, an unelectrified Kabila in the Dimbicha woreda of the Amhara region. The nearest city, Bahir Dar, is over 200 kilometers away. Although the Kabila is not yet connected by a grid or mini-grid, many folks already own and use solar home systems. Plus, there are numerous businesses that would consume energy and even need for a cell tower. We interviewed Mr. Chane, a farmer who currently faces problems with manual threshing and would highly prefer to pay to have his crops threshed mechanically. We also spoke to Mr. Anmawe, a grain milling processor who mills teff and maize year-round, and would like to expand his processing capacity by replacing his fossil-powered grain mill with an electric one. Our productive uses of energy, like Mr. Anmawe's grain mill and the threshing processor, could help increase the capacity utilization of grid and mini-grid infrastructure, while also supporting businesses for agricultural processes. Now, we selected the maize, wheat, teff, barley, and dairy value chains because of their importance for the rural smallholder communities and potential for processing. Because Oromia, Amhara, and SNNPR were among the top 4 producers for those value chains, we limited our survey efforts to rural communities within these regions. This allowed us to ensure that the sites surveyed had high production across multiple value chains. To properly understand community needs, we conducted a survey of farmers, traders, and processors. Our team visited 51 Kabilas across Oromia, Amhara, and SNNPR. And we used both agricultural production data and geospatial data analysis to seek out mini-grid viable communities with high agricultural production. We focused our sample primarily on agricultural processors to understand how they conduct their businesses and any barriers they face. But we also interviewed community champions to understand a bit more about the community-wide challenges and priorities, and traders to understand when and at what scale farmers cultivate and process crops, the form in which crops are traded, as well as volumes of crops consumed locally or by the farmers themselves. As we began to observe that very few women led some of these processing activities, we sought out female respondents not connected to the value chains just to understand their interests. How did we evaluate the activities? Local capacity focused on understanding if processors already had the business knowledge and technical awareness to carry out processing. Offtake market focused on whether consumers in rural communities already paid for processing activity. We also evaluated whether processors already used mechanical equipment and if viable electric equipment already existed for a specific process. Lastly, we considered seasonality and determined whether a processing activity could be deployed nationwide. Now, these four metrics altogether provide a comprehensive understanding of the current viability and support needed for activities. So we frame Tier 2 and Tier 3 activities as those that would still be important to pursue in the future, but not immediately viable for electrification with mini-grids. Some Tier 3 activities might be better served with the current tools used and might not make sense to be electrified. Our findings identify grain milling as ready to be deployed today. Now, I won't discuss this in depth, but in the report, our team also conducted economic analysis to confirm that electric grain flour milling is viable across the year. Other activities like threshing and drying may be viable with some support. For threshing, barriers include the norm that farmers often do not pay to have their crops threshed, and often instead rely on family and friends to do so by hand for free. Also, the location of threshing at the farm in a threshing shed would require mechanized equipment that is mobile if farmers cannot transport crops to a threshing center. In our report, we also highlight gender and urban or rural consumer demand among the considerations for electrifying agricultural processing activities. Following these findings, I'd like to briefly touch on support needs. For processors, the lack of electricity and access to financing are two top barriers. Equipment deployment stakeholders face challenges too. For example, most equipment manufacturers are based around Addis and don't always have a good knowledge of the communities in those rural locations and how to serve them well. Financiers have capital constraints and are worried usually about the ability to pay back and timely service and maintenance of the equipment that they invest in. So in closing, RMI is developing a program to scale productive uses across Ethiopia. The goals are to align and connect cross-sectoral actors, to also test and demonstrate the viability of equipment and business models, and to identify strategies that can be replicated in the rollout of electrification efforts. Ultimately, we hope to build a supportive ecosystem to enable the scale-up of productive use projects alongside the Ethiopian electrification rollout that was discussed earlier. I will emphasize that all of this is a collaborative effort, and what you're seeing here really is in the preliminary stages of development with local partners. So thank you again for tuning in. Please consider checking out our work online and definitely get in touch if there are any questions we can answer.
Thank you. That was great. So now I will call upon all the speakers maybe to turn on your video. Thanks. I think this discussion of productive uses in Ethiopia's agriculture that takes us above and beyond lighting is going to be important as Ethiopia rolls out productive uses of energy. A recent survey by IFPRI, for instance, shows that the amount of time that people with and without electricity spend on collecting fuel wood for energy doesn't really matter, doesn't really change, because electricity access is not the only component of productive uses. So I hope this type of discussions will lead to more productive uses, both in the house and in the farm and in agro processings, and that will obviously will unlock billions of dollars from agriculture as we add value to agricultural production. I don't see questions from attendees. Please, attendees, if you have any questions, please put it on the chat. We are accepting questions on the chat. So far, I don't see questions. Katarla, do you see any?
No.
Okay.
Excuse me,
Is
John,
yes.
I think the chat is disabled. So
Oh, okay. Fukadu Murada, please go ahead. If you can tell us where you're from and tell us also where your question or whom you are targeting the question to, that will be great.
yeah, so my name is Fakadu Morada. I'm a water resource engineer based on North Carolina, United States. I work for Research Triangle Institute, but I'm originally from Ethiopia, so I'm so excited and so some of the pictures that I got the opportunity to see, the mills and farmers. So I'm really touched by the research. I really want to encourage the young researchers to collaborate. Especially, I'm also impressed that the last presentation was showing the energy requirements are not just for lifting the water, like Sue was saying. You have these energy requirements starting from bringing the water to the surface and then producing the crushing and converting that. Even we have to look at energy that are required to process the food much more than what they are doing right now. Because if you don't have that market chain, even if you produce, then there will be a disincentive for the farmers to produce more if they cannot sell it for a higher price. So when you do research, I understand that you have to focus on your individual specialization, but collaborating in a bigger space to include all the process would be important. And I just want to encourage you. It's not a question, it's a comment. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Fakadu. That is very important, and I think it works for everyone to collaborate. I see a lot of collaboration already. I would like to take this chance as well to appreciate the Ministry of Water, Energy, and the Ministry of Water, Irrigation, and Energy, because most of the productive use projects and studies are usually accepted with open arms, and we have seen that under the EEG project. So I would like to take that opportunity, but I think we need to expand the collaboration as well with external entities. There is a question from Claudia Ringler. Perhaps I think this might be towards Dr. Freud, and she's asking, how does the government of Ethiopia support women farmers and entrepreneurs to get access to energy technologies? Dr. Freud, or can you say a few things? So her question is, how does the government support women farmers and entrepreneurs to get access to energy technologies? Dr. Freud, I think you are muted. Is there anyone who'd like to? I think Dr. Freud could be the right person, but I think he's muted. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, but there was, power interruption. That's why actually I missed if there was any question while Mr. Fakado was talking.
Okay. So Claudia Ringler is asking how government of Ethiopia supports women farmers and entrepreneurs to get access to energy technologies.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the question. Actually, the policy is in favor of women because it's understood that women carry lots of challenges, be it in the rural areas or even in the urban areas. So especially those single moms, they are highly encouraged because they are supporting their family, and if there is technology, they will be given priority. If there is some fertilizers and so on, there is always some priority to women and to less advantaged community. So in fact, even in introducing some technologies, it is the women from each household who are selected and maybe given some awareness and so on. So even if there is a loan credit system, still the women are assumed to be prime targets. So in this way, you can say, I think our women are in a better position. So maybe if there are additional action lines, maybe we can share others' experience. That's in short I can say for now.
Thank you, Dr. Fayed. Is there any question? Feel free to unmute yourself, but I don't see additional questions. But Claudia, you raised an important question. I think, as Dr. Freud rightly said, most of the burden of lack of energy, as well as lack of use of productive use of energy, lies on women who have to collect fuel wood from far away places for domestic cooking and heating purposes, and they are also the ones who have to travel a lot searching for meals, and I think they are also the target of a number of initiatives by the government. But I think obviously, as Dr. Freud said, I think there needs to be a concerted effort, because even if there is credit, then women farmers are not going to be in a position to have the collateral that requires to buy these equipment. So hopefully, I think we can learn more from other experiences as well. Is there any questions from from speakers to another speaker, or if any of the speakers want to add a few things? Earlier we didn't have much time, so if you want to say a few words, the floor is yours.
Hi, Dawit. I might add a little bit of our experience during some recent field surveys that we did in SNNPR and and in the surrounding regions, describing what are the—
Scarlett is from Rocky Mountain Institute, right? So yeah.
Sorry, I should have started with that. Thank you, Dawit. I should have started with that. Hi, my name is Scarlett. I'm from RMI, working on figuring out what the right productive uses are that can support the scale out and the rollout of electrification. We can't fully answer that question, but we can provide a bit more context about what we've seen in the field surveys that we've recently completed. And as you rightly say, there is a stark correlation with lower mechanization found among women. So specifically what that means was that most of the economic income producing activities that women lead are less likely to be mechanized, mainly because of the upfront cost and difficulties in finding access to credit. Some interesting things that we saw through the field surveys was we carried out 2 types of focus groups that included men and women, and then focus groups included only women, to try to understand what are the barriers specific to women as they try to embark on adopting more productive uses. And an interesting insight that we saw there is that when we were talking to the bigger groups, the bigger demand for appliances was around TVs, radios, things that supported connecting the community with the broader country. Whereas when we talk to women-specific focus groups, the key demand there was around appliances that would reduce the burden in the household. So appliances like electric cooking that would reduce their burden in finding firewood, as well as other appliances connected to food production. So what this told us was that women have, in facing a bigger burden with sustaining the household, there is a bigger demand towards these appliances that could reduce this burden. But as Dawit rightly says, some of the key barriers that they face is access to credit, and even when the access to credit is there, about how to cover that collateral that most MFIs require to provide credit. You're muted, Dawit.
I'm muted. I'm sorry. So thank you, Scarlett, for that excellent intervention. If there is anyone, we have 3 more minutes as well into this meeting. If any speakers would like to add, or attendees have questions, please go ahead. But I would like to add that having productive uses, as Scarlett mentioned, to reach a particular household or women in general, is going to require having the credit facilities working, having the extension services for productive use of energy in place, and the training and so on needs to be there. But the supply chain also has to be in place, because in most places people know it, even if they have access to credit, they can't get the product. So there has to be a working value chain for equipments, and also a recent study, not so recent, but a study by IFPRI also showed that people using biomasses from the field is affecting agricultural yield for farmers. So there is a significant trade-off between you demand or having access to productive use of energy in the house with what is happening on the farm. We have 1 more minute, but if there is anyone who wants to say a few things. I think otherwise I would like to take the chance to thank everyone, all speakers, as well as His Excellency Dr. Fiot Waldahana to attend and listen to these meetings, these discussions in person, despite his busy schedule. I would like to thank all attendees, and the recording of this session will be available on this same website that you joined from. And thank you so much for everyone. I think we are exactly on time. Thank you everyone again.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. Have a good one, everyone.
Thank you for the presentations.
All right.
Thank you.